All right, it's 7:30 here in Europe, in Austria, where I am, and I hope everybody's back from watching the great movie, The Meaning of Wild. And I've got Ben Hamilton here already, right? Hi.
How's it going?
Hi, nice to meet you. I can't believe I just saw you on screen, and now I'm sitting kind of virtually in front of you, so that's really cool.
My younger self.
Well, welcome. Maybe I don't know. Maybe just introduce yourself quickly, since that movie was created. A bit of time has already passed, so maybe tell us what you've been up to, and then we will dive in some questions from our audience.
Sure, that sounds great. Yeah, my name is Ben Hamilton. I'm a creative director. I run an independent production company right now called Wild Agency. We were formerly Pioneer Studios. We focus on creating conservation content for nonprofits, public lands. I do work as well for BBC, Nat Geo, Smithsonian, Travel Channel as a cinematographer and producer. And I would say over the last probably 3 or 4 years, we've shifted to almost exclusively doing conservation work full time. And so, yeah, we made this in 2014. So it's been a little while since I actually watched it during the break to refresh myself on it. But yeah, it was a pretty awesome shoot to get to do. And as someone who studied wilderness pretty intensely in college and am constantly involved in public lands communications, that was a fun exercise, and trying to find a way to get people to relate to it and connect to it. And since then, we continue to work on that challenge of finding ways to connect people to nature and to different campaigns. We do really, really intense impact campaigns. And now I think that the big difference between what I used to do and what I do now is we not only design videos, but now we design the entire campaign around the video. So from concept through creation, through ad targeting and marketing and distribution to try to get people to, move on a specific issue. But yeah, I don't know how much you want me to go in depth on things, but happy to chat about whatever you'd like.
Well, I'm sure that Max, the chairman of the European Wilderness Society, has quite a few questions as well for you until the audience will tune in to ask theirs.
Yeah, obviously, I don't want to steal the precious time that Ben has for the other people attending this discussion. But when we first stumbled across each other, I was really inspired by the movie, and you just missed the big panel. I suspect you missed it, the panel discussion I had with John Hausendorf and Gavin about the human element in this wilderness and the lack of being humble about it, and the whole issue about should we intervene in wilderness now that climate change is threatening wilderness. And it's kind of really exciting to see that we somehow have elevated wilderness to this ultimate big thing, and everything else is less than wilderness. So Laura was showing us the issue about the Oyster Bay, and how a wilderness designation was actually pushed through against the will of the local people, and wilderness was used to shut down an oyster factory, where in fact, if you look at it, all they needed to do, they could have and actually that oyster farm didn't do any ecological damage, but they could have left it there by just taking the word wilderness out of the equation. But we somehow are stuck on that word, and that's why the meaning of wild is so diffuse, because it seems that we have a certain picture in our mind, and if that is not met, it means we have to do something. And I'm just curious about, you being around quite a bit and having seen it and being the author of this great little movie called The Meaning of Wild, looking at the current issue. Should we, for example, in a wilderness forest threatened by fire, do fire control, or should we just let it burn? What do you think about that? What do you say?
I think it's a challenging question. The way that I look at it is that, I think this film was a good example of how everyone has a unique lens that they see the world through. And in conservation, even within the conservation community, we have all these micro lenses of how we value places. Birders care about birds being there. You know, scientists care about biodiversity. Outdoors people care about recreating there. You have all of these issues, and there's kind of this really interesting question of like, you know, where's the crossover? And to your point of whether we should do it, if our ethic lies in restraint, then no, we shouldn't do it. And I think if the core ethic of big W wilderness is restraint, then we shouldn't do it. I personally don't think we should. I mean, I've been doing a 5-year project on the Elwha, which is a dam. It's one of the largest dam removal projects in the world. It's an Olympic National Park, and getting to watch that whole process every year, being out there filming, you have 2 real interesting narratives here. There's this huge push of people to rewild the area, let salmon come back, let it become what it once was, quote. And you have this other side that's like this expediting effort on the scientific community to get it there. We're going to pump hatchery fish into it. We're going to restore the banks so that they structure, you know, faster. And it's honestly like a narrative debate. It's not like, it's just an ethics debate. It's just us deciding what we want to do. Like there is no answer, right? Like it's just whatever we all decide. I think in our community, we all argue that there's like laws around this stuff. There's rules about how, like, all of this is human story. Like if we all agree on it, it's the reality. If the Trump administration has taught me one thing, it's that protections that we assumed law protected, if not backed by massive narrative agreement, don't matter, you know? And I think that's like the bigger question of, you know, should there be structures that maybe are more flexible than big W wilderness, and are there like nuances there? Absolutely. Like, do I also think there are protections that need to be in place? Because if not, like they're not going to be protected. Yes, I do believe in big W wilderness, but I also think we have to recognize that as conservationists, we have to find ways to connect with everybody, and we have to find ways that our narrative can touch enough people in different worldviews that we can all kind of come to the table, at least with some basic, because I think if we don't do that, we lose it.
This is actually an interesting, because in all of the discussions, I've always come aboard the word conservationist. And that's actually the total opposite to what wilderness is, because wilderness is a process. It is open-ended. It doesn't have a clear objective to reach. It just does what it does. And then you have, and I think maybe it is again that different philosophy that you were alluding to. Wilderness is often looked at from nature conservationists, but you look at what the word conservationist means. It's putting it into a glass bottle, put a rubber seal around it, and close it. And that's it. And don't even allow it to change, to adapt, to move. And it's kind of amazing for me to see that what we expect from nature, we do not apply to ourselves. The
Right.
Adaptability, the flexibility, this changing environment. We are really sometimes in the discussion stuck in this one definition, and then you have this human conflict. Right?
Yeah, you know, when I think about it, obviously the last wild areas on Earth are like at the fringes now, right? They're where indigenous communities live, or there's some communities that they're truly, you know, like really remote, kind of where lots of big megafauna live, those kind of places. The challenge that I think we have is we need to, you know, as conservation communicators, how do we find the ethic, which is restraint, ways for people not at those places to exercise that? Because if they don't exercise that in their daily life, they're not going to care about it on the fringe, because they're never interacting with the fringe. Now, for those of us who are deep in this, like, and we can all debate like the nuances of management and stuff. But I honestly believe, like, if you can't practice the ethics of restraint, of wanting to have processes like you're saying, be wild in your own backyard, it's very hard to apply that then, elsewhere. I also think that if we don't have a community of people that's diverse and big enough that also believe in restraint, we won't protect this ideology just at the fringe. I mean, I don't think the Wilderness Act would pass today. I don't think that ideology is thriving enough where we would all agree on that. And I mean, at our company, we're asking really intense questions now about behavior change work and how can we communicate in ways that inspire behavior change. And one of the biggest kind of scientific, at least the research consensus on it is, films won't do it, single events won't do it. Maybe in a moment you'll click on something and you'll say, I'll vote for this person, or I'll like a petition or whatever. But for us to make long-term change in these spaces, like, we have to make it normal to think that wild places should be existing and that we should engage with wilderness with some restraint, or, I mean, that has to be a normal idea. And I think in conservation, like, one thing that I would like to see more of and that we're working on is, it's not that we need to make a film about wilderness. It's that in the background of a Marvel movie, conservation is just in the background and it's an assumed part of the future that we're going to exist in. It's in the video games that we're playing. We're not just like harvesting resources and every kid grows up, playing Minecraft or playing, Age of Empires when I was growing up, like these video games where you're harvesting wood and building stuff, like that. It's normal for us to find a way to interact that's not just this extractive interaction. I think, and in the films that we create, like, the question for me is, how can we find ways for people to relate to restraint, not just when they're in wild places, but that be maybe the highest exemplified version of that ethic for them, because that's where I see the value. For me, it's awesome that I know there's a place where we're saying that's the one place we're not going to let capitalism, F up. And, for me, it's like, it's an ethical thing. And it's an ideological thing. Now, all the nuances of what do you do with people who are living on the fringe? How do you navigate that? I mean, there's a lot of nuances there with that. Those people need to be involved in that conversation. I think a great film to watch is A River Below. If anybody hasn't seen that film, I highly recommend watching that. I mean, it's about the Amazonian river dolphin and kind of how really successful conservation communication ends up destroying communities there. And I think it's a good example of like a bad side of that. But I still believe that the restraint part of wilderness and just letting natural processes be is a worthwhile ethic. But all these things are battlegrounds. There are no rules, right? There's no, it's just us trying to argue that ethic should be higher than another ethic.
No, I fully agree with you. And we talked today about sometimes the humility that if we allow with an open mind to let nature show us what it can do. And I mean, I think I've shown that to you before. If not, I'm just going to take 1 minute, and that kind of exemplifies it because we talked about it earlier when you're talking about that dam. I mean, this was an area for 86 years, which was a military, Russian, NATO, the Nazis and the Prussians, nuclear bunkers built. And that area actually looked like this back in 1992. And then just a couple of years later, it was this. And the only reason it was able to develop in the way that it did was because, here's Gary Oyer from the National Park Service, the wilderness manager, was because, I mean, there was like 6 years between those two pictures, 7 years. It's because it was so full of ammunition that the restoration was too dangerous. We humans could not go in there because no insurance company would have covered, the nature conservation is being blown up. So the nature was able to do what it wanted to do, and there were still remnants. There's still bunkers in there, but the wolf has already moved in. And besides the wolf, you see the old, houses that are there. And then you see suddenly these rivers that were like non-rivers, suddenly with dead wood and beaver and everything moving in so fast, and the last roads that we couldn't restore are being demolished by the trees. And you know the story about Chernobyl. I invited you, and COVID didn't work, but I will definitely invite you to come with us to Chernobyl, because if we just step back and you take a look at this picture from 1992, and then you look at these pictures just 10 years later, it is amazing what nature can do if we just allow it to do.
Yeah, and I mean, I did another project in Montana about Arctic grayling and the effort to kind of save this super endemic population of Arctic grayling. And it was on the other side of the spectrum where, basically the managers were under threat of their species being listed on the Endangered Species Act, which had all of these repercussions. A complete change in how they manage their entire landscape, all a management implication for all of the ranchers around the area. There's so much going on there, but the efforts that they were willing to go through to tweak that landscape to save the species was astounding. I mean, they culled like hundreds of thousands of fish out of the thing because invasive species might have been an issue. They dredged or potentially considered dredging this lake in a wilderness area because they were having overwinter habitat issues. They dynamited this massive, weaving of this new river that they had been dammed in the 1920s that they found out. And so they, brought dynamite into this area and blew it up. And so, in a matter of 5 years, they basically, completely just like destroyed / manipulated the landscape to save this species, which, I guess all it tells me is like, when we sit down to ask questions about what we want to do with our planet, like we've got to lay down like priorities, and we have to also recognize like what are the goals and what are the priorities that we're not willing to like kind of admit to. And one of theirs is that they have management goals that they have to like adhere to, and they have to go to bosses and tell them that they accomplished things, and they don't want these ranchers to sue them, and they don't want these people to come after them. So they're willing to go, to tear this place apart to save this Arctic grayling and not make it a listed species. And it's a great example of like, they had left it alone, the species probably would have died. But by the same token, they had dammed that river 100 years ago, and that's why the species was on the brink anyway. And so it's kind of like, I don't know, do we want to spend millions of dollars?
Two wrongs do not make a right.
Yeah, and I don't know what the answers are for this stuff. Like I think that we've got to like prioritize our ethics here, and like we've got to prioritize what we want to focus on. With the LWA project and these rewilding projects, there's a question to be had there. Is the priority that the community wants salmon as an economic engine, and they want to expedite that process so that they can have salmon faster? If that is the goal, then like, yes, you can go in and like, pump in hatchery fish, work to like restore upper habitat for overwintering grounds and whatever. If the goal is, if the ethic is restraint and just letting nature be, that might take 100 years, but maybe that's okay. There's not a right answer, unfortunately. The question is just, who can we convince of it? And it's hard when the economic argument's on the other side, right? Like the people in this town near the Elwha, they want salmon. And when the scientists say, hey, it's gonna take 100 years, that's not like tangible to them, that's not going to be when they're around. And so, I hope that we can find ways to let people recognize the value of the restraint ethic, and that ethic be what comes to the surface, and people can just say, look, so what, there was a building there, so what, there was whatever there, everyone wants to say, no, there was a village there, so it was never wild. It's like, it doesn't matter. It's this, wilderness, Big W wilderness is a new idea. This is not an old, this is a new concept. But that's fine. It's an expression of a new value, which is restraint. And like that comes out of a place of us not restraining ourselves in all other activity. And like, I see there's value in that. And so, I mean, there's some questions about what do you think about rewilding? I mean, that's what I think about it personally. Like, I think there's a huge value in rewilding. I don't care what you call it. To your point earlier in the other discussion, I don't care if you called it wilderness. I don't care what you call it, but the restraint value of just saying, look, let's back off and do that. I think that's a value worth communicating.
There's another one.
Comments. The need for conservation comes from human activities reducing biodiversity. Yeah, which is perceived as negative. Yeah, you know, there's this question of kind of like, so what do we do? You know, as a filmmaker, I think one of the exciting things is that like we constantly look at the past for like solutions to this stuff. You know, I love learning about indigenous communities and how they connect to nature. I haven't seen one that I can like copy paste to modern industrialized Western society yet. And I think it's a hard thing because we want to say, well, what are the examples out there? I don't think there are examples that we can look to yet. We can learn, there's tons to be learned, but I don't think we have seen the perfect example yet of where we're in modern, westernized, industrialized world and somehow nature's thriving and we're not destroying. Like, I don't think we see the path yet. I think the exciting thing about filmmaking and storytelling is we can challenge people to tell those stories and give us vision of that. And like, I think there's work to be done in sci-fi storytelling, in you know, big fantasy films and the books that we teach our kids that tries to maybe paint visions of what this could be for us. Like, you know, I'd like to see more of that. And I think Avatar is like a good example of it. But, you know, I think Avatar was just kind of a remaking of an old issue. It wasn't painting a future where like in the background, we got a vision of like, oh, that's an interesting way to think about us living in society where we're still having benefits and we still have AC and we still live in nice homes and we still have consumer products, but somehow these things are happening. I think the circular economy stuff is like a step in that direction from the previous talk. Like there is huge steps being made in the circular economy. There's a question that someone asked about metrics for valuing, you know, human interaction other than just like extractive. And I think that like the circular economy is kind of an example of people moving that direction. I could rant on this stuff all day, so I don't know. We should answer specific questions.
Let me read a question from Vlado,
Sure.
because he didn't share it with all the audience, just with the panelists. So he says, it would be great to develop a plan to share experience how wilderness is interpreted and implemented in the US and Europe. Maybe that would be a subject to make a film about.
So I will say that like I am currently developing like a follow-up film right now to The Meaning of Wild. I have not like launched it. I'm actually in the process right now. We are launching a nonprofit arm of my company called Wild Story Labs. And one of the campaigns that we're taking on is like a more comprehensive wilderness campaign. One component of that is a film called The Story of Wilderness. And it's, you know, in a simplified version, a reimagining of wilderness in the American mind, but a look at how storytelling plays a role in how we look at nature. And also looking at what the pulse is now, what the pulse was in the past, and then most importantly, challenging and looking to kind of the storytellers of today and getting input from really high-end storytellers of what they would like to envision and share with people. That's a project that I'm working on and I'm really excited about. And it's a much more in-depth version of kind of investigating this idea. Someone asked, how do I choose what films I make?
Can I challenge you on that, Ben, before we
Yeah.
go into the next one? Can I challenge you on that?
Yeah.
During the opening keynote, we had a Chinese philosopher working in wilderness with us. And she actually quite nicely explained that the Taoism and the Confucianism in China totally prevents basically the concept of wilderness. It just doesn't fit into the Chinese culture. We know from Europe that many cultural, even languages, do not even have a word for wilderness. So if you pursue that idea And that, because wilderness is not a US thing, it's not a European thing. It's not, I mean, in all of this, we are interconnected. And it's these last resorts that we have where, nature, at least to some degree, is somehow intact. And the question for Mariana was, biodiversity is not a measure of wilderness. When you look at a beech forest, it has a way lower biodiversity of any grazing land with cows on it. So if only biodiversity is the thing that we aim for, we have to scrap and immediately delog and deforest everything, because the biodiversity is not very high in these wilderness areas compared to man-made areas. But I would like to challenge you. I mean, Ben, we've been talking on it, but never really pursued it in detail. But if you really want to go down that route, basically the meaning of wild globally, let's, whatever way you're going to use it, we would love to be part of it, because we already in Europe with 27 countries see totally different interpretations, regardless that we have a standard and a clear definition of it. But in the people's mind, everybody has got a different picture. And that picture, to capture that as a filmmaker, basically go out and capture what people have in their mind, and then show to the rest of the world. If a German talks about wilderness, this is what he sees. If a Chinese, this is. If a Sudanese, this is what he sees as wilderness. And I believe, proven to be wrong, that even though the pictures may be different, there will be a common denominator in all of that. And the challenge that I'm posing to you is that at the end of this film, even though there's many different pictures, ultimately they all will have a common denominator. And what is that common denominator? We can speculate, but it would be kind of fun in this experiment to try to find that common denominator across maybe not 180 countries. That we have to ask Leonardo DiCaprio to foot the bill for that one, but at least across some countries. And we certainly can help you in Europe with that, and even raise a little bit of money for that.
I think the interesting thing to me is in general, I actually don't think that our formative ideas about wild places occur from conservation communications. Those are in the background of the stories we grow up as kids. They're in the films that we see, in the books that we read. They're in the trips that we take. And I think that's where, the investigating this idea of the story of wilderness, it's really like asking, what role do stories play in shaping our view of the natural world? And especially of our most wild places. When we tell negative stories about nature, does that reflect in how we treat it? When we tell positive stories about nature in the background, does that reflect how we treat it? Are there still narratives that are from 3,000 years ago that are still thriving today, or are we using new narratives? It's really just a big investigation of this. And to your point about other cultures around the world, I mean, there's so many interpretations of this. And I think, the takeaway for me of the big film, the conclusion should be, it matters what stories we tell. It matters not just that we're telling wilderness stories. It matters that in the background of the stories that we grow up with, if nature's seen as evil, if nature's seen as a resource, if nature's contextualized in those ways, that sticks with us through our whole lives. And if we actively think about that and start asking harder questions about that, we might be able to start changing society, because we might be able to start not seeing it the same way we've seen it for thousands of years that's resulted in the way we're in it. I hear you on it. I mean, it is fascinating to imagine the thousands of lenses that people kind of view nature, and especially more wild nature in. And I hope that in that exercise, we'll peel back the onion enough to where people can step back and say, okay, all of these are stories. What story do we want to tell for our kids? And that really matters, you know? So, you know, I'm not someone who wants to like, you know, force a specific story, but that's one approach to that question.
Yeah, well, Ben, I'm just going to encourage you. This is our little website, and you look at the exponential growth. People are interested in it.
Yeah.
And when you look at this is not a US, I mean, yes, we have a lot of visitors from the US, but you look at all the people visiting and forming themselves about South Africa, Portugal, Greece,
Yeah.
Croatia, Bulgaria, Brazil. Brazil, you would think wilderness would be much more common. And they find Tunisia, Hong Kong, Thailand. So it is a European look. There's only a few countries which in 2020 have not informed themselves about our little, and we are small, communication efforts. So I think you have an audience there. But I think Hannah asked the question that is also very important, right?
Mm-hmm.
How do you personally pick ideas that you want to put on film? How do you go about it? All dice?
Yeah, I mean, most of our work is client work. So, you know, I make a living doing this. I wish I could just do passion films. You know, this wilderness film and films like that are good examples of projects that I get to just kind of sit in the background for years until I get enough momentum and build enough infrastructure and fundraise. And but 90% of the time, it's people coming to me saying, "Hey, I have a communication challenge. You know, would you be willing to work with us to communicate that issue?" We've, you know, in the last, since the meaning of wild, I think I've visited 40 something countries on film shoots. You know, I mean, last year pre-COVID, I did 9 different, you know, countries for different conservation projects. And so that to be said, I have a lot of experience, and my team has a lot of experience translating messages and stories from the front lines to general audiences. And so, you know, people come to us and say, okay, I want to achieve X. How can we do that? And often we're reverse engineering it, saying, okay, well, who's your audience? Let's really get to know them. What kind of a story, what kind of language do they use? What kind of a narrative would connect with them? Great, what kind of characters should we turn to that they would trust? Great, now, you know, let's go look for those stories. Let's go find those stories. I don't know if I can I share my screen? I mean, just to give people a taste of, I know I've got to enable optimize for video. This totally might not work. I know this is always a challenge, but
it worked in the past.
Can you guys see this?
Yep.
Okay, I'm gonna play this. This is just a 1-minute thing. This is our latest reel, so you can get a little bit of a taste of what we do.
It was pitch black. Waves are crashing. Out of nowhere comes this creature.
I've had the opportunity to grow up around the ocean, experience firsthand the amazing wonder that is undersea.
Breathe.
We opened up for development. They don't have a home.
Is wilderness important? That's why they're here.
Seeing bleaching like that changed everything for me because I could actually visualize climate change.
Breathe.
The fires over the last couple decades have become bigger and stronger.
The general public asking questions is very, very helpful. There needs to be a culture change. And with that culture change, it needs to not only start with the fishermen, but it needs to be followed by the person that's purchasing from them and then the consumer.
Breathe.
If we don't do something about this now, it's going to be too late.
Breathe.
Even one tiny little human in the world can make a gigantic difference if they focus their efforts.
Did that work?
Yes, And I'm going to play lottery now so that we can hire you for doing some great stuff for us, Ben.
Yeah, I mean, so that's an update of what I've done for the last, since 2014. But, for us as a company and in my, experience, I think what I've realized, and I think the meaning of Wild was a good example of this, is that like we can attempt to do this high level communications where everybody's connecting on a single issue. But I think what really needs to happen more of is we need to recognize that everybody's seeing the world differently. And we have to start looking at each unique lens and find the language that connects with each of those lenses and the people and the stories for each of those lenses. And so while we might do some big campaign, and we did a campaign this year where we started off with an idea for a big campaign, and then we gave up on that and we fragmented our campaign where we did a super liberal climate change film. We did a hunting version of that film. We did a fishing version of that film. And then we did a tourism version of that film. And they were with completely different distributors, completely different audiences, completely different language. And as a filmmaker, I love doing that because I get to flex like different styles, different creative approaches. But it's there has to be a recognition that us just shoving down the same narrative on everybody and thinking it'll work is just not true anymore. Your news feed's different than my news feed, which is different than your neighbor's news feed. And especially with the internet now, we're even more fragmented because the stuff that we watch is an echo chamber. And so if you don't create content that breaks through to that audience and is authentic enough, you won't connect to them. And so I think with our campaigns, like what we're starting to do now, and with something like Wilderness, it'd be awesome to have this big high level approach. And I really want to do this story Wilderness film because it's just, I love the idea of just mentally that exercise of seeing where the world is on this issue and seeing where the future could hold for it. Simultaneously, part of that campaign needs to be a fragmented campaign where we target 100 different micro audiences with microfilms that's, the Southern conservative Christian relation to Wilderness version. That's the Mississippi floodplain, version of that. That's
or the Ukrainian, the French, the Italian.
All of them. I mean, you're in the same boat, yeah.
2,000 years of civilization. Okay?
And my hope is if you did that successfully and you did it at a level where restraint is the common denominator across all of this campaign, even though they're not speaking the same language, even though they're all seeing the world with different things, even though the stories are all different, maybe restraint they relate to. And maybe just the basic image of let's just get excited and unite on maybe just not touching something and letting it kind of be. I love that with Wilderness, and I love that idea.
Okay, we actually coming to the end, but I'm going to chuck one more thing at you. We are now in a project by the European Union, which is focusing on livestock protection, where in fact, it is a wolf conservation project. The wolf in Europe, we've got more wolves than the United States now, has become a contentious issue and has become a paper board against all of the other things that are going wrong in the agricultural subsidy system. Mm-hmm. So we blame everything on the wolf. Not we, but society, and especially the people whose livelihood is not lost, but impacted from it.
Yeah.
And our challenge is we did manage one thing. We did manage that this project is not an NGO-driven project. So it's a wolf conservation project, which is actually driven by the Organic Farming Association, because they are especially impacted by this. Now, I will contact you if that's okay with you, because that approach you have in trying to develop, and attention span is 2, 3, 4 minutes. It's not half an hour anymore.
Yeah.
To portray that livestock protection is the future without actually mentioning the wolf on one side, and then having a microfilm the other way around, which is targeting the nature conservation community, that livestock protection is important to protect the wolf. That's something that, if I may, we will share a couple of Zoom sessions together.
I think that type of thinking is really important. Like, and I think the other type of thinking that's even like, a step further than that is like, if as a society we care about wolves, then we've got to care about helping these people mitigate the impact of them. I mean, you know, like, and if we're not willing to bear that burden, it's hard for us to go say, oh, you guys are all terrible, you're farmers and you hate wolves, but we're not willing to pay to compensate them for their livestock if they get, you know, I mean, I think a really good film that came out this year that had a good kind of example of that specific issue was The Biggest Little Farm. Have you seen that film? I don't know, that's one that's,
yes.
you know, it's farmers in California trying to create a like ecosystem farming kind of situation. And then, you know, they're like, I don't want to put pesticides. I don't want to kill any animals. There's no pests. Everything is in the system. And then
It was on Netflix, I think.
yeah, it's on Netflix. Then this coyote kills like, you know, a single coyote comes in and kills like, you know, 80 of their chickens and ducks and stuff, right? In one night. I mean, like, and the guy shoots it finally. And he's like, you know, and so I think there's also like a level of like, we have to be honest about the impact of something like that. And, you know, we don't want to put the wolf on this pedestal. Like it's a perfect animal and it's just a spirit of the beauty. It's an animal, like, and just like we're animals, and some animals do things that we wouldn't consider to be ethical either. But again, unless we're as a society willing to step up and say, we care about having wolves, but we also care about eating and having farmers, you know, then what is that compromise? Like, I think the idea of you partnering with industry or people to find the way that they can connect with their audience best is important and needed. Like that type of thinking is needed. I saw this one other question, like, do you think that the need for wilderness lies within each of us? No, I actually don't believe that. I don't think I don't think there's anything inherent. Like, I think we could be born on the moon and we could find happiness and we could tell stories. Like, human beings are so adaptable. I would love for our communal narrative to prioritize wild lands so that we're not going to live on some desolate planet without anything on it. Do I want to fall into the slippery slope of believing that there's inherent rights to any of this stuff? No, like I don't. I think we have to protect it because we choose and opt to do that. How can we inspire people for wilderness who are far away from it? I mean, this is a big question. Like, I think it starts with believing that restraint is an important value that they should hold in their home. You know, if you're not willing to step on a bug in your backyard because you believe that that bug has a place in your garden, like that's where it starts. Like, you know, for them, if you just are willing to spray it with Raid, it's a bad sign of how we're going to treat nature at large.
Okay, well, we've talked longer than we most likely envisioned, but you've inspired us again. And like I said, I will get back to you because this is a 5-year project, so we still got some time to think about it. I again have to thank our team down there, which have been here since 6 o'clock our time in the morning, which is like 13 hours back. We will do that again next year, so definitely on public. Maybe you have another film next year to show us, so I don't have to fall back on The Meaning of Wild, even though it's a favorite.
I love showing The Meaning of Wild.
I love it. I still love it. And the team loves it as well. Okay? And I'm handing over to our managers.
Thank you guys for the opportunity. Yeah, I really appreciate it.
Thank you for being here and for sharing your movie with us and your thoughts on wilderness, on its future, on what we can do to improve the society's view of it. So that was very interesting. Thank you and have a great rest of the day.
Thanks so much. You guys have a great night.
Thank you.